of evil. I am Dungeon Master, your guide in the realm of Dungeons and Dragons.
Welcome back to the Titanium Hangar. Welcome to the LJN Advanced Dungeons and Dragons week here at the Titanium Hangar. We're going to take a look at everything made for this toy line from 1983-1984 back in the day from LJN. We're going to look at every single one of the action figures. We're going to take a look at the play set on day 2, the Fortress of Fangs. Day 3, we're going to look at the PVCs, monsters, and everything else. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to finish stuff on Retro Wednesday. But this is fun this week because we're starting to see the modern iterations from NECA and Hasbro starting to arrive, which is really awesome. And so kind of a fun way to celebrate an homage by looking at where it all began. We're going to talk about this and more coming up. Before we get into looking at every single figure that was made and the writing mounts that they go in, we're going to talk quickly about the TV show. The TV show was not really associated with the toy line. There were a few spillover characters such as Tiamat, such as Warduke, and Strongheart up there. But past that, there's really no spillover, and we're starting to finally get TV show figures made. These characters based on characters in the game, from my understanding, and I just have a lot of fun with the toys, so let's get into that right now. Alright, so there are 3 sizes of figures, more or less. Actually, there's quite a bit of variety in size and scale, which makes this line very interesting in my opinion. So, looking at all of these figures, down here we have, Elkhorn, and then Strongheart, and then we have the Young Male Titan. And as you can see, Titan is much bigger than this little guy over here. And this is supposedly a giant in his world. So it is kind of fun to have figures in different scales. Think about in the 80s when we had a He-Man mixed into this. Or you had let's put him right here, a G.I. Joe mixed into all of this. So you can kind of see where He-Man, G.I. Joe scale, some of these will work with other toy lines. And it's pretty cool. First on the list is Elkhorn. Elkhorn is a dwarf. Dwarves can see in almost total darkness because they spend much of their time underground. Shorter than men, dwarves are still very strong and are renowned as miners of gems and precious metals. So, looking at these, I am going to show the 2 variants at the same time. There are 2 different versions of this figure. There's a Series 1 and Series 2 or 3 down the road. And I figure with time, we'll just show them both at the same time. So, looking at this guy, he is pretty cool. He is short, and as we saw in the beginning, he is the shortest of the figures. And he does come with a shield and a sword. His sword is yellow with kind of a red skull or face at the bottom of it. And that's pretty cool. Now, turning around to the back, you're going to notice that there is a difference. There are a couple of differences. First of all, his legs are different, with the fact that this one actually has legs that are connected in there versus the G.I. Joe kind of connection with the T-Peg kind of thing. And he also has Battle-Matic. So Battle-Matic meaning that his arm will move up and down. And you can actually use the sword. He doesn't really want to hold the sword as well. So anyway, he does come with this shield here. Now there's a shield variation, but I have 2 of the exact same shield. I didn't really chase down the shield variation on this guy. I'm pretty sure it's pretty easy to find. And the thing about this is that when you get into these earlier Battle-Matics that are Series 1 made into Battle-Matics like him, the price difference between the 2 isn't very much. So really the price difference is, does he have a shield and a sword? And that's about it. I mean, I don't think really people care about the Battle-Matic, but the Battle-Matic is a much superior figure. This is Elkhorn. He is pretty cool. And real quick on the articulation, he has legs that go forward and back, and then he has shoulders that go up and down, and they go out. That's really all his articulation, no head articulation. You're going to see that with most of these figures. Next up on the list is Kellic. Kellic is an evil wizard. And the thing about this guy here is, I think, he looks really cool. He has a very kind of a white beard. And the good wizard you're going to see is kind of got a yellow beard. It's kind of strange. He does come with 2 accessories with this wand. It's a giant staff and a small wand. The staff, he does not hold it well. And truthfully, I've had him holding it for like 2 or 3 months, and now that I mess with it, now he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to hold it. That always happens. He does have a really interesting cloak that he wears, or whatever you want to call this robe, and it's sewn on the sides. And so putting him in and swapping him out is kind of strange. It really is strange trying to get him in and out of this. And it does have this extra little piece on the back, which does look kind of cool. This is one of the cheaper figures in the line and easy to acquire, because I guess they made a whole bunch of them. Seems like he's probably a popular character. And so with that, evil wizard Kellic. Pretty cool. Next up we have Melf, or Perle. He actually has 2 names or a running name change. So, coming from a race of magical forest-dwelling beings, the elf fighter is able to combine all the best traits of many beings. So this is a pretty cool little figure here, and one of the things I want to point out is that you can sort of cheat the weapon storage by putting his bow and arrow on his back or over him like this. And I do that. I saw somebody do that, and I was like, that's really smart. Let me do that. And so I did that. I think maybe it was like an eBay listing that somebody did that, which is pretty cool. He does come with this green sword, and you'll see I've got 2, and I'll show you why I have 2. And when I set out to get him, that sword was the hardest thing to find. And sadly, I passed on a sword by itself because, like, yeah, I'll just get a complete one pretty cheap. And no, I mean, he's not really that expensive, but I was trying to be cheap. With this line, it's a little bit harder than you think. He does have some sparkly stuff on his cape on the back there, and neither one of these really got the Battle-matic treatment, and they still have the same similar type of articulation with the arms out and arms up. But the biggest difference between these two, the fact that you have a brown shield and a blue shield. So I hear the blue shield is a little more rare than the brown shield. I was told by people it's about equal, but maybe slightly more rare by the blue. So does look pretty cool overall. But here's what I found out when I got the blue one. I noticed that the blue one is a lighter shade of, let's see if it picks it up. Does the camera pick it up? A lighter shade of skin tone. And the one with brown has a darker shade of skin tone. I mean, I don't know if the camera's picking it up, if I have too much light in here, but I started noticing that, and I realized that it is a full-on variant running change. Even the paint on the chest is brighter on this one and darker on that one. So kind of a cool, interesting little one going on right there. And we can quickly see how it is like to move the arms out like so. And you don't have a whole lot of articulation, but you have enough, and it's enough to make it feel like he's truly wielding a sword. That's a good thing overall. This is Melf Perle, pretty cool looking little elf kind of guy. I wouldn't mind having a few of these running around. Next on the list, we have Mercion. Mercion seemed like a pretty simple figure to get, but I guess the girl figures are harder to get in a vintage toy line. She's also known as a cleric. Clerics are the most holy of all people. They use their knowledge to help the sick and the wounded. Their holy powers also allow them to do many other things. So she looks pretty cool, pretty interesting. She comes with a lot of cloth accessories, which, by the way, were not easy to acquire. Seems like it'd be pretty easy, but it's not. And especially with the little original rope attached to it. And I'm not really sure what this is made out of. It's not very stretchy, the little waistband piece, but it looks like they had just a ribbon and they tied it around her waist and stuff like that. So pretty cool though, and she's got full on armor like a knight underneath her is the way it looks. And with that, she also has this giant staff, which is kind of like a metal bow staff with some spikes at the end, which is interesting too. And then from the back, that's kind of how she looks. What I did was I took the best looking side and faced it forward. I have been experimenting with ways to clean this vintage cloth without ripping it or tearing it or breaking it or anything, but I think that she already looks pretty good. I don't want to mess with the sparklies. Now, all of these seem to have, not all of them actually, a lot of these have the sparklies on it. We'll get into one that has no sparklies on the cape, but there's only one. And yeah, this is Mercion, a little bit harder to come by. She took me a little longer to find, but she was still a lot of fun, a lot of cool. We're going to see her again when we get into the mounts. Next up, we have North Lord. Now, North Lord has a variation as a shield shooter, so I'm showing both of these. But he's a barbarian, and barbarians are always strong, always fast, and always hardy humans, able to track in forest or mountain. They're powerful and capable fighters, far different from most races. So with this is a very interesting figure. He is one of the bigger ones, kind of like we saw with Young Male Titan at the beginning here. And he comes with a really cool helmet. And once you take the hat off, you can kind of see the helmet off with these wings. So sometimes these wings are missing, sometimes they're broken off or whatever. So that can make it a little bit challenging. So he does have a lot of parts. He might have the most part count if you count the fact that he's got these two wings sort of glued on there. And the difference between the shield shooter and the non-shield shooter, and I'm not going to go into the difference in the color of the plastics because I think there's not paint. First off, it's not paint, so one could just be sun-worn or something, and the other one's not. So I really don't know about all that, but they have almost everything else the same. When you start looking at these guys, you can see that they have what looks like this exact same body, exact same legs, exact same feet, hands, and all that kind of stuff. The only difference really is in the left hand with the shield shooter, and we'll show that mechanism here in a bit. They also have the same sword and the same way to sheathe said sword, and so with that, that's kind of cool overall. And it's kind of fun that you have a place to put the sword, which this is 1983, 1984, and a lot of the toys didn't do that at the time. So this is really smart, really ahead of the time with a lot of the ways with this toy line. And with that, you could swap parts from the non-shield shooter to the shield shooter, and then the shield shooter actually does have the battle-matic action, so the arm that doesn't have shield shooting gets the battle-matic action to it. And then I guess we'll take this opportunity right now to show shield shooting. I'm only going to show on this guy, and I'm really only going to show on this guy. Unlike, I'm just not going to risk it because it was too hard to find nowadays. Probably was easier years ago, but these are just getting harder and harder to find, the shield shooters. And with that, that's what it does. That's all it does. So there's not much to it. It's just a thing that gets done. And then the other thing is with these shields, everyone that holds a shield, now I did kind of make sure, I did a few things. Some of these I did do the polish trick to make them stand a little bit better, but they don't like to stand. They don't like to hold their weapons. If you have something really important, you want them to hold it, don't even give it to North Lord. But this is North Lord with his variation of a shield shooter. Next up, we have the Ogre King. And Ogre King comes with another shield shooter variation. And ogres, in general, can almost be found anywhere. They're huge, man-like creatures, standing a little over 9 feet tall. With low intelligence, they are often forced to use weapons and items stolen. So these figures do come with quite a bit, and you're going to see there's a massive difference in coloration between the two of these, but I'm going to step him back. I'm a little, really scared of breaking that guy, so I handle him very carefully. This one here, he does come with a helmet. He has his helmet on there, all that kind of stuff. He has a sword. So all the accessories are exactly the same except the shield and the shooter piece. He does come with a mace, which is cool, but it's all recolored for the other one. This one has some sort of like it looks like a snake. That one looks like a snake. That kind of stuff on him. He does come with a waist piece. Now, I didn't really talk about this before, but this is a rubbery waist piece that you put on. They are a little tricky to get on sometimes, and I've seen them broken or ripped or torn and that kind of stuff. So getting them in good condition could be a challenge overall. Here they are from the back, and with that you can kind of see the difference in the size of the shield. You can see the difference. So it's the exact same mold, but just different coloration to these. And I was going to, for a while there, just get parts for this guy that I was needing and recolor them. But I found them after a while. It took a little bit, but it was a bit of a challenge, but it was worth the hunt, I guess, in the end. So Ogre King, I do view Ogre King as probably a true builder of the bunch, and seeing as how maybe the king is actually the shield shooter, and then the original ones that are cheaper would be just the standard ogres. I mean, that's an idea. That's something. That'd be kind of cool. Okay, Ringle Run is next on the list, and Ringle Run himself, wanting to help mankind above all things, this magical human has a wide array of spells at his command, believing that the power of magic was meant for maintaining law and order, this person will always be on the side of good. This is a pretty basic, plain, boring figure, actually, overall. But there are a few cool things. First off, his robe is kind of sparkly, if you can see that. And then he has this back piece that goes up, kind of like Kellic did. And, was it Kellic? Yeah, Kellic. And he has this staff of his, which, it's not broken. I don't know why I got tape on it, but, oh yeah, that's right. I put tape on it so he would hold it better. He was dropping his staff. That's why I did that. Anyhow, two different spots that he can hold it better. And with that, it's a pretty cool little staff. And again, sewn on the sides, hard to get on. It's like the sleeves and the sides are sewn. So getting this on, if you're like swapping them out, I actually found one that had better paint on the face. And I wanted the best robe, which kind of kicks up there. But pretty cool figure. Ring of Run really does kind of bring all of this together for the good guy and the bad guy, and good wizard versus bad wizard. Strongheart is next on the list. Strongheart has 3 different variations we'll get into here in just a bit, but the most honest and brave of all the types of fighters. This human desires nothing more than a good fight against evil, and it's always riding a proud charge. His warrior sword and his good right arm. So the thing about this figure is that this character was actually in the cartoon show from the 80s, the Dungeons and Dragons. That's not advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and he was kind of a coward in that show. So that was kind of interesting twist on a brave soul. Now, looking at all 3 of these, this is the first one that came out. Then they came out with a shiny one that looks like a knight, which I prefer. I actually have about 3 of the shiny ones. Those are my favorite. And then this one right here is the one that they call Battlematic, and he has a little lever in the back where you could make his arm go like that. And so, again, he commands a bit of a hefty price, but I got him cheap because he's worn out. I probably should touch the paint up on him and stuff like that. I eventually will, but looking at these, he does have the sparkly cape, and looking at the back with the sparkly cape that he's got going on right there, I did have the sparkles to the inside on this one. And this is problematic when it comes to trying to get these capes back on. I might be able to do a video showing how to do that. It's not really hard. It's just tedious, time-consuming, and all that kind of stuff. But there they go. Well, as you can see, I probably didn't put them back on very well myself in the first place. But there's the back of him, and just kind of looking at what's going on here. Now, you were going to see this guy again, so this isn't the last we see of Strongheart. NECA is making a Strongheart figure. So that's going to be really cool to see the next generation in the 7-inch scale. But yeah, this is Strongheart. Pretty basic, pretty cool. Warduke is the next one on the list. And Warduke, as a class, this character is able to meet any physical challenge. Fighters use all types of weapons, but their favorite are magical swords. An evil fighter's purpose in life is to become strong. And so this is a pretty cool figure overall, and when I think of this line, this is what I think of. I see this mixed into G.I. Joe collections and lots, and kids that didn't collect this line had it mixed in with their G.I. Joes as some random bad guy, and that is truly where this guy comes from. He was also in the show. He did capture the Dungeon Master and freeze him and that kind of stuff. Looking at him from the back. So this one on the left is the one that is Battlematic. This variant is a Battlematic variant, and Battlematic, if you don't know, push that down as arm moves. We'll do that in a second. But it's so strange, and people have pointed out it's like he's only got half of the clothes, the other half's missing. I don't know why they did that, and I'm probably having like an issue with my leg there. As you can see, when they get to the Battlematics, they don't have that type of leg. It's just straight forward and back. This has more of a G.I. Joe kind of a operation. This is just stuck in there and goes forward and back. So more like a Star Wars figure, more like a G.I. Joe figure at the hip only. Still have the same range in the shoulders. Now, they do have this shield, and I don't know that there's a shield variant. It just looks like you got some sort of, I don't know, is that a bull or something on there? Maybe a skull. And then the other thing about him is there's supposed to be some sort of a head variant where one of these is shorter than the other. I don't know. I can't see it. People showed pictures. I still really couldn't figure it out from the pictures. So I just don't know if I've come across that variant or not. And I don't really care. That's like a very minor variant. Anyway, but this is Warduke, probably one of the most common, widely known figures in the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons line. This is the young male Titan, like we saw in the beginning of the video. But young male Titans are one of the most magical of all creatures. For this reason, they are also one of the most feared of foes in battle. Never far from their magical weapons and shields, they stride the earth. And they win their battles, I guess. So with this, this figure looks pretty cool. And he's one of the most common, pretty easy to get, but not easy to get complete. Like, he's always missing his spear, maybe his sword, maybe his helmet, maybe his shield. There he is without his helmet on. His helmet does not like to just sit. It rolls or something. Anyway, maybe I can get that to bounce. So the heads are the same, the body's the same. Just like the North Lord, there's not much different other than just the shield shooting arm action that we saw right there. The same sword can sheath in there, which is pretty cool. Which is why I have him hold the spear. Now the spear could go in there from what I hear, but it just seems really awkward, him sheathing his spear or whatever you'd even want to call what he does with just a loop instead of a sheath. But anyway, the shield shooters all have Battle-matic action also. And so that's the feature they had going forward. And the feature that they carried into some other lines, such as their Dune line and a few others. So the Battle-matic action just continued along. They also had it in their Thundercats and all that kind of stuff. You know, really, I should do a video on LJN and all the lines that they had. But this guy is big, and because he's big and powerful. But when I look at Young Male Titans, they are the cheapest of the group. I think the same thing as the Ogre King. These would be quite ripe for the troop building. I have to say, when it comes to this and the Ogre King, I wasn't going after duplicates. It's just buying lots and stuff. That's kind of how they fell, which is why they're not all complete. But I think it still looks pretty cool, pretty impressive. They have a nice little lot of maybe 6 of these on a shelf. Little army. Tiny army. Next up, we have Zarak. Zarak is an assassin. Zarak also stole the name. Well, maybe Transformer stole the name for, it was down the road, so Transformer stole the name for the head of their Skapanak. Anyway, he's an assassin. The assassin's primary tools are the poison dagger, stab in the dark, the disguise, and the lesser skills of a thief. So he is a thief. The most feared assassin in the half-human, half-orc one. Anyway, here he is, looking pretty cool. He's got this little dagger here, and we're going to revisit this dagger in a bit. I have a theory about the dagger, and we're going to look at it live. Well, it's not really live, it's being recorded. So there are 2 different versions, and the difference between these figures are that one's Battle-matic and one's not. So meaning that the one that's not Battle-matic has the old school G.I. Joe style hips, and this one has just front and back. Meaning that this one can stand a lot better than this one. Also, looking at the face and the paint sculpt and all that kind of stuff, he looks pretty cool. He's got a blue hood. The colors are really striking. Blue, red, black. I mean, that's really cool looking. NECA is making this figure also in the 7-inch scale, which means he'll probably be about 4.5 to 5 inches tall, I think. It's really remarkable how they look exactly the same from the back, except just like one little button here, like a little trigger to do the Battle-matic. And again, this one really didn't cost me much more than the original one. So the original one, the hard part is the weapon. And there is another version. I have 2 brighter ones. There's a dull color of the weapon. So I don't know if that's like an official should go with the Battle-matic or should go with the first one. But I like the brighter looking ones in their hands better. We'll revisit the weapon later. This is Zarak. Next up we have Beaumark. Beaumark was a later series figure, and he does have the Battle-matic. We'll get into that. So Beaumark is a great and noble crusader. He fights on the side of good and can never change, or else he will lose his special powers. Beaumark and his holy sword are feared by all evil doers. So he does come with his shield. Now, not all figures come with shields, but he comes with this one, which looks pretty cool. And it matches his deco, which is really cool. He's got white. I don't wear white because if I spill like some soda on it, it feels like it ruins my day. So yeah, he pulls that off pretty well. He does have this axe, and he has this blue sword. Weird thing is that it's the only thing I had for this toy line before I started collecting it. I had the blue sword. I had the blue sword. I had something else too, but I know I had the blue sword and maybe one other thing. It's cool how it does have this piece here to hold the sword. Is it a scabbard? Something like that. And then here is his cape. Now his cape doesn't have the sparklies on it. That's how you know the difference between his cape and the cape of Strongheart. And you got a discoloration and stuff on this guy, but I'm just happy to get one that looks as good as it does from the front. There is the Battlematic action. It's He-Man Battlematic action, but in the reverse direction. He's a left-handed hitter or axe wielder. Pretty cool looking figure overall. We are actually going to see him later when we do the mounts, because I have a little something fun planned for that. This is Beaumark. Beaumark is a really cool looking knight, and he's got a couple of accessories that are pretty slick, and I like how he can have all of his accessories stored. Next up we have Deeth, and notice I said Deeth. She doesn't have a place to store all of her weapons. So with that, Deeth is a powerful fighter who is capable of defeating any and all evildoers in combat. Since childhood, she has trained as a warrior with many weapons. She is feared by many because she uses her sword. She has a sword. So it's one of those things, like when I saw this sword, I was thinking, wait, is that the same sword as the one that you get with Kellic? And no, it's not. It's a different sword, but it's kind of interesting. It's got a yellow base and silver on the front. She does have this shield with an eagle on it, which is kind of weird. It's almost like the pre to Hockler. It's like a Hockler pretense in a way. I don't know. Or they just want to probably reuse some of the ideas. She is a knight with her helmet on, and unless if I didn't read that it was a female, I would have thought it was just a small dude like Melf. So that's kind of cool. I mean, I guess I'll take it. Female knight, and she's doing the job and getting it done back in the 80s. And with that, though, she does have also this little mace, which has no place to store, and she can't stand unless you get her shield balanced right. Swear it's going to take an hour to put these back in the display. So she does come with this tri-mace here. It's 3 separate little pieces that are clipped into this red chain and onto her club looking thing. It's all yellow and red. Cool looking overall. And she can wield it like everything else. And she does have Battlematic action. So we can bring her back here. Her cape, hardest part to get. The Battlematic comes over her cape, which is kind of cool. And she does that. Not a whole lot. That's Deeth. She is pretty cool, pretty interesting. And yes, we will see her again when we're riding the mounts. Next up we have Drex, the bad guy here. And Drex is another shorter figure, and he's pretty cool. I didn't even have to adjust the camera for Deeth, or from Deeth. So, fighters, both good and evil, are known for their superior strength. Drex is one of the most strongest and feared of all evil fighters. He carries a variety of weapons and is an expert with all types of weapons. So he's an expert with all types of weapons. So he has a sword with his Battlematic action, and he's got like a skull and snakes in him, and that is so cool. Then he has a skull and snakes on his shield. That is so cool too. This is a really interesting figure overall, and since it's a later series figure, people always ask crazy money for him, but he's still pretty easy to get. There's a lot of them out there, so I don't know why people ask so much for him. I got mine for like $35, so I just knew if I waited a few months I'd find it, and I found it. So, and that's with a lot of these things. If you just wait long enough, you'll find for the right price. But I think he looks pretty cool, and he's pretty interesting. Now, so some of the Battlemax, they have a waist swivel. He doesn't have a waist swivel, but he's got the upgraded waist articulation. He does have a mean sneer, and so just that. There's no other variation I know of this guy, so I don't know much more to say. And it looks like, I don't know if that's just paint rub on mine or if he's actually got damage to the back of him that was intended, but really cool little figure that just came out of nowhere. I just didn't know he existed until I started collecting him, and I think he's cool. Next up, we're talking about Grim Sword. Grim Sword is probably the coolest bad guy out of all of them. Probably the coolest figure in the whole toy line. And he's got a cool accessories, but just something about him just screams awesomeness. So, Grim Sword, Evil Knight, is a mighty warrior and fierce fighter. He hopes to rule the land someday. After he defeats all his enemies in combat, Grim Sword has many evil friends fighting by his side, such as Warduke. So one of the things is that NECA is making this guy, and the one that NECA is making looks so amazingly awesome. It's just, it's fantastic. And then you look at, like, it's inspired by this figure itself, and yet you can see every aspect of the NECA one that's so hyper detailed coming through from this guy. He does have this ball and mace that's really cool. It's a snake that maybe he, I don't know if he's a snake master. And his sword. Now his sword here was actually quite a challenge to acquire by itself. So real easy if you just buy one that's already got a sword with it. But if you're stubborn and you're just trying to wait to just buy a sword, I think the reason this one gets lost so easy is because it doesn't stay in. Kind of like Beaumark's. Beaumark's doesn't stay in very well. This one doesn't stay in very well. They fall off. And the mace is kind of hard to acquire too. His snake shield kind of makes me think, like, when I look at his shield, I think they probably intended for him to be a shield shooter down the road. If they were going to continue that line, they probably would have made him into a shield shooter. That's what I think. But really a cool figure. Let's see, his Battlematic action is just like Beaumark. And I just have this Beaumark feeling from him. Mine hangs up a bit. But yeah, pretty cool. Kind of on the expensive side. Kind of hard to stand. You got to play with the shield and stuff to get him to stand on his own. Grim Sword. Next up is Hockler. And Hockler he's sort of a falconer kind of person, but he's a Hockler kind of person. Rangers are fighters on the side of good and specially trained for scouting and fighting in the forest. Hockler is the famous of all Rangers. He is very strong and intelligent and is an expert Hockler in Hocklering. So one thing about this is that it sort of takes what G.I. Joe did, which they did this first, but what G.I. Joe did down the road copied this, and like I showed the shipwreck earlier, this is better than what Hasbro did because it just doesn't break as it's a bigger, thicker, holds on better than the birds that they use in G.I. Joe. Now, obviously, it's a bigger figure too, but this just makes more sense to me. Now that I'm talking it up, it's not one to clip on right, but once it's clipped on, it stays. And there's a lot of breaks for those, and I never see a Hawk broken, but I mean, you almost never see a Hawk anyway. He does come with this weird looking colored, it's like a reddish orangish strap, and he has a dagger that slides into it. He has a bow and arrow, which is static bow and arrow. I could almost get him to look like he's pulling the bow, which that's the goal overall, is to make him look like he's pulling the bow. But that's why it's designed the way it is. It looks the way it does. Kind of cool, but mostly he just holds the bow, right? Getting around to the back, he has a quiver that holds his arrows for his bow and arrow, which makes sense. And I didn't really show it too well, but the quiver is built into the Melf. The Melf has this quiver built in. No time like the present to try to make up for past mistakes, but the quiver's built into the bow and arrow on Melf. As to where he has a separate one right here, and this is a soft good that kind of clips in. Here's his dagger, and if it looks familiar, well, you're going to find out where it came from. And look. But I'm going to show you where I think the dagger came from. It looks exactly like the one that comes with Zarek, only it's painted in with silver on the end, and so it's probably cast in yellow and just painted silver for the blade, which is smart. Why not reuse parts if you can? But then again, I was told by some people it is slightly different. I don't really know. This is Hockler and a pretty cool toy from the 80s LJN toy line. Next up, we have Mandoom. Mandoom is a pretty cool looking figure overall, and he's a shield shooter. But Mandoom is a very fierce warrior from a very strange place. He has golden skin and appears to be made of stone. Mandoom is often called to this world by magical users who need his help in war or battle. He is frustrating because you don't have a place to store his extra weapon. His hammer, sledgehammer. So that's one frustrating piece. He does have a belt that could have been used for it, but they, for whatever reason, they didn't engineer a way to do it. And his belt is really strange. I will point this out. That fell off. To put his belt on, you have to kind of tuck this knife piece into here over this strap. So there's a buckle right here, and the knife goes into it and over that, which is really strange. And it took me a while to figure out that's how it was done, because, of course, I didn't get them complete, and I had to piece them together, and finally I did. A little scary, too, with his shield shooter piece. So there's his face. I don't think his nose is supposed to be red. You know, beggars can't be choosers over here. I'm not being too picky with the guy. I got one. I got him complete. That's all I need. I'm happy. Not true building this guy. I don't know anyone that is. His helmet looks a lot like, and what I first thought was it was a repaint, but then I looked a little closer, and nope, it's not a repaint of the Young Male Titans. It's way different, completely different. It's a similar idea, but way different. Now he does have the Battlematic action. Really cool looking sword. Like no other sword looks like this in the toy line. So later on, they did put a lot of investment into tooling. And maybe it's because they reused a few figures as they carried them forward with the Battlematic, and then they had a bigger budget for tooling new ones. I don't know. Really cool figure overall, and his shield and his shooter works just like the other ones. Just no reason to tempt fate, you know. He does have kind of like a bit of a gloss to his shield too. It is a little shiny, where all the other ones are more or less a matte finish. This is Mandoom. This is Metaflame. Metaflame is similar to Mandoom in a lot of ways, but Metaflame is a fire giant. Fire giants are one of the many types of giants on the earth. Metaflame is the most dangerous and most powerful of these fire giants. He is very tall and muscular and has bright red eyes. Metaflame, pretty cool figure. The similarities between this and the Mandoom we just looked at is the fact that he has no place to store his big old giant sword, and then he's got a giant mace, which is cool, and a lot of little pieces to it. He has a money bag right here, and now the same thing. You clip the money bag through this loop to close it, which is kind of cool. It's kind of cool, but not knowing that at first can equal quite a bit of frustration, and stretching this 40-year-old rubber around that can be really tough. Okay, it's 38, 39-year-old rubber, but he is a shield shooter, and he has the same mechanism and all that kind of stuff. He also comes with a removable helmet, and which can be kind of a challenge to acquire, a pain in the butt to acquire. But he's got a crazy color scheme: red hair, purple, yellow, and then some black accents. And this is what his shield shooter piece looks like. Looks like a tiger or something. Not really a tiger, maybe a panther, breathing some fire or flame. And this is Mandoom. Not Mandoom. This is Metaflame. Metaflame. It's a pretty cool looking figure, and it's actually easier to acquire than a lot of people act. There's probably 6 to 12 of them on eBay right now. So the last of the action figures in the line is Zorgar. Zorgar is an evil barbarian that the meanest and strongest of all barbarians. He fears nothing or no one and will attack his enemies with a club and a dagger, 4-sided dagger, or with his bare hands. So this dude is really crazy and strange, and I know a lot of people like chase down this dagger. I found mine complete for a good price. I think like $45 or something, which is a lot of money for like a little figure like this. But seeing as how old this is, and he was in really good shape too, I was really shocked. I was like, yay, it's pretty good shape. He also has this giant club, and he's different because this is the introduction to LJN and the LJN line, where everything does this in LJN. So when it comes to like Dune has several of them that do that, quite a few of them in Thundercats, and so with that, I think this is the only one that does the 2-arm kind of weird thing in this toy line. So from the back, I did show the back, but he has this giant metal strap, which is like chains around him, and he does share a stylization with good old Warduke, with like one leg's covered and the other leg's not. I don't know, it was like a style back in the 1400s or something, or the 1200s, or whenever this was supposed to be going on. But yeah, style back then. Is it going to make a comeback? I hope not. Anyway, this is Zorgar. Zorgar. Not Zorog, Zorgar. Now we're going to get into the mounts. This one is the Bronze Dragon. There are 3 mounts. The Bronze Dragon, there's Good Destrier, and then there's the Evil Nightmare. And so we'll get into looking at all of these. But with this one here, this is pretty much a static figure, but the head moves. The mouth doesn't. It has quite a bit of paint apps to it. He has bronze, golden bronze, sort of. His tail moves like this, and he's very stable. He does have removable wings, which they just come out like that. And sometimes you see these broken, and with that. And I didn't put a sword in his hand, which now I look kind of silly. I don't have a sword in his hand. But one thing about this, it's made for Strongheart, which is silly that they have so many figures in the line, but Strongheart will have 2 of these mounts that are made for him. They did copy the same type of stuff that we had going on with Kenner. And this is the silver version, which that's why I didn't have a sword in his hand, because I recently swapped out, because I picked up an extra silver one, and I would just put them in the mount for display purposes. So the thing about it, though, is that, let's see the other side here. It looks like those are his legs out there. And Kenner did this kind of mechanism here with their Tauntaun. They did it with the Dewback and maybe something else. And it's an obvious copy of Kenner. Very obvious, but it looks pretty cool. He's got some paint on his toenails and all that kind of stuff. There's a strap to hold things on. So, Bronze Dragon, let's look at Good Destrier. This is Good Destrier, and it comes with, or he or she, it's a horse, comes with a few things going on. First of all, we do have the same kind of legs that looks like the legs. It's faux legs when you push them in. Looks like his legs are straddling it, which is interesting. And that is a kind of a rubbery piece that goes around. Then you can clip in this front wing piece that goes into here and clips in. So this piece is different than you'd see on any of the other ones, because it has a slit in it to accept that piece. And then around to the back we have the tail, which is supposed to go up and down, but mine, I wonder if somebody glued it in. It's not really going up and down. I'll have to check that later. Anyway, it doesn't really bother me that much. He does have a bridle, which is kind of interesting. It's like a 2-part bridle, which it connects to the top armor on his head, which is its own thing with a strap and all that. And then it connects to the reins. And he could sort of hold the reins, but they're so short, it doesn't really... It feels like you're stressing it to go over the armor, so I just leave it dangling there. But one of the things, this is still a pretty common item. You can go get a dozen of these or so off of eBay right now, and I just ended up with some extras, and I thought, what would it look like if I added a few characters to the mix? So I think the steed would work fine for pretty much any of them. His head does move also, so you could get some articulation there, but Beaumark was the hardest one to get in here. He fits perfectly because he's made for it. The rest, it just seems like it was a challenge to get him in there. Shouldn't be too much of a challenge to get him out, but that's going to be tomorrow's problem. But yeah, this is Good Destrier. One last feature of Good Destrier is that there's a sword sheath. You can just put the sword in there for any of the characters that are riding that have a sword. Just kind of want to show that's an option, and the figures fit and their swords all fit. So I really do think that they might have intended this being used by multiple different characters, but it just seems strange and odd to me that one character is going to get 2 different steeds or 2 different mounts. Lastly, we have Evil Nightmare, which is Warduke's ride, Warduke's steed, I guess you could say. So he does the same thing. So he does have head articulation, like Good Destrier. He does have tail articulation, which it actually moves properly. And he has the saddle strap on that has faux legs, kind of the fake looking legs painted on to match him, so it's like really a one rider kind of thing. He does come with hooves that are, these are articulated hooves, which is really interesting. I know they are on the front. Let me see at the back. I don't think the back are articulated. Well, there's one. Maybe they are all supposed to be articulated, but it's interesting. It's like he's got fire in his hooves when he runs, and he has kind of this whole bridle kind of thing going on right there, but he doesn't, I don't think he has reins, but if he's supposed to have reins, I'm missing them. So with that, he's a pretty cool looking figure, pretty cool looking horse, just evil nightmare, and I wonder if NECA's going to make it, or someone's going to make it in the modern day line. All right, so there is day 1 of the LJ in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons week, and we covered all the figures, every figure that's an action figure, and the steeds, the mounts, the rideable mounts the figures go in. Tomorrow we're going to take a look at the playset, the Fortress of Fangs, and there's a lot to it. There's a lot to discuss, a lot to talk about. Talk about that tomorrow, and then day 3, of course, is going to be everything else. So let me know what you think in the comments below. What do you think about these figures? Do you have any of these figures? Are you planning on getting any of the NECA or the Hasbro cartoon versions? Let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe. Head your hanger out.
It's about time you got here.
Time I have plenty of. What have you got?
I've got a jewel for the crown of your master.
Say Dungeon Master, did you?
Yeah. You know him?
Know him, I don't. Know where he is, I do.
Tell Venture that Dungeon Master is his for the right price. Now go. Very soon, Dungeon Master, you shall be worth 10 times the trouble it took to capture you.